guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, think about giving me a thumbs up and a like down below, and let's get this video on the road. So, what are we doing today? Well, we are doing the Southern Livings magazine casserole of the month. This month was a creamy egg strata, and don't even get me started on the word creamy. Anyway, the first thing we need to do is go ahead and cube up our French loaf. Initially, when I read the recipe, it said that I needed a 16 ounce loaf of French bread. What it actually said was I need half of that, so I needed about 8 ounces. Mine was a 14 ounce, so I just kind of guessed it once I realized that I only needed about half, or a little more than half of what I had right here. The next thing I needed to do was to butter my 9x13 pan. However, I didn't feel like using butter, so I got my little spray bottle out here. Now when I store it, it has to be stored without pressure, so that's why you saw me screwing the lid down. Then you pump it up, and you can basically use any oil you want and turn it into a greaser for your pans. Once you have your pan greased, then it is time to start loading the bread cubes up into the bottom of the pan. About here is when I realized that I only needed about 8 ounces, so I put the rest of that into a Ziploc bag to be used for something later. Next, you want to melt 3 tablespoons of butter and then pour it over the top of the bread. Next, we need 2 cups of shredded Swiss cheese. Now, I'm not sure if you can actually buy Swiss cheese already shredded or not. We just went ahead and bought it in the block because they say that if you buy the block and you shred it yourself, it's better. Supposedly, if you buy cheese that is already shredded, they have some kind of something on it to help keep it from sticking in the package. So that's why they say it's better to go ahead and just shred your own because it melts better. Is that true? I don't know. That's just what I've heard, and so I'm gonna roll with it. As you can see, my counters are a little bit slick, and with that wooden cutting board on top of the concrete counters, it was just sliding around. So I went and got one of my baking mats and put down. Another thing that you can do is you can get a paper towel and wet it down, place that down on the counter, and then put your cutting board on it, and it will help to stabilize your cutting board. I just didn't want to do that because I was afraid that I would walk off and forget there was a wet paper towel underneath my wooden cutting board, and that creates its own set of problems. This block of Swiss cheese was actually 16 ounces, so I didn't actually have to shred the whole thing. But usually when I use Swiss cheese, it is shredded, so I just figured I'd go ahead and save myself the time later since I already had the shredder out. I measured out what I needed, set the rest aside in a Ziploc bag to put in the fridge for later use. Now the next thing you want to do is go ahead and place your 2 cups of shredded Swiss cheese on top of the bread mixture. Also calls for a half a cup of freshly shredded Parmesan cheese. As you can see here, I'm pulling it out of a bag. Yes, I cheated. I didn't feel like shredding up the Parmesan cheese. Sometimes you just roll with it. No, you do not have to skin the onion. I just did that. The other thing I needed to prep was my chicken stock. As you can see, I used the Better Than Bouillon stuff, so I just needed to add a little bit of that to some warm water. It mixes up better when you add it to warm water. I wanted to dice my onion, and when I actually sliced into my onion, there was just a bad piece. I just removed that one little bad piece and the onion was fine. So I went ahead and diced that up to get it ready for the next step. Now I needed to get the next step ready. It says to add 3 tablespoons of butter to a saucepan and put it over medium heat. Instead of that, what I did was I used my cast iron skillet because it was sitting there on the stove saying, "Oh, look at me, I'm pretty." Just kidding. Anyway, it was sitting there and it was clean, so I put my butter in there. I went ahead and I added a little bit of extra virgin olive oil as well because it gives it a little higher smoking point for the butter. Then add your onions and your garlic in and cook them for about 2 to 3 minutes until they get slightly browned. Yes, I used the jarred garlic because that's all I had. Sometimes you just have to keep those things in your back pocket so that when you run out of the fresh stuff, you have a backup. Now it's time to add 3 tablespoons of flour because we are going to make our thickening agent. You put the flour in there and you work it around with a whisk to kind of soak up into that butter and let it cook for 2 to 3 minutes. That might be a little long, but you let it cook so that you don't get the flavor of raw flour. Then you go ahead and you pour in the 1.5 cups of chicken broth so that it can start thickening. Once that has had time to thicken up a little bit, go ahead and pour in your wine. I do use a gas oven, so I probably should have turned that off just so I didn't start a fire, but as you can see, nothing happened. It's not quite like pouring whiskey in to make a whiskey cream sauce or anything like that. The other thing you want to do is you want to add your salt and pepper. Now, I do like things that have quite a bit of pepper. It gives it a lot of good flavor, but you can always go scant on the salt and the pepper and then taste for seasonings later to adjust. The other thing you need to add is nutmeg. I went ahead and prepped my eggs. Basically, when I say prepped them, all I did was just take them out of the shell. As you can see, if you drop a shell into the eggs, just use the shell to get the little piece out. Or if you drop a big piece, hey, just pick it up. So at this point, my mixture is just sitting there kind of melding together. You bring it up to a boil and then reduce it down to a simmer for 15 minutes until it thickens. Making sure to occasionally stir it so that it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. At this point, I stuck a spoon into one, check for consistency to see if it had thickened, which you can tell because it has covered the back of the spoon, but also I wanted to taste for seasonings. I decided it needed a little more salt and pepper, so this is the time to add that. Once the 15 minutes is up, you turn off the heat and you add your sour cream. Now, if you look at my sour cream, it looks kind of funny. That's because the top part of my fridge freezes things, and apparently my sour cream was sitting up there and it kind of got frozen, but it melted into my sauce just fine. Now that you have your sour cream mixture, you need to temper the eggs. If you were to pour the hot eggs or the cold eggs into the hot mixture, you would have scrambled eggs on your hands, and I'm not sure that that would taste very good. I mean, maybe they would, but what you want to do is you want to add the hot mixture in a little at a time into the eggs while constantly whisking them. That will help bring the temperature of the eggs up so that when you pour the eggs into your mixture, you don't have just a pan of scrambled eggs. I realized at this point that my spatula was not doing a very good job of moving the mixture into the egg mixture. So I went ahead and I got a measuring cup to help move the mixture over. And as you can see, my left hand was not cooperating. Once the eggs are tempered, then it is time to put them into the sauce. Once they're in the sauce, then it is time to mix it up and then pour it on top of the bread mixture that is in your 9x13 pan. And at this point, I decided it would be nice to be an octopus, so I had a couple more hands. Now this is what has kept me from getting this done earlier in the month. Because you have to make this up and you have to cover it with plastic wrap, stick it in your fridge for 8 hours up to 24 hours. That's the part that is hard. This is definitely not a fast recipe because now that it is set in the refrigerator for 8 to 24 hours, you have to pull it out, let it set on your counter for an hour. Then preheat your oven to 350 degrees, place your pan into the oven for 30 minutes and bake it. And as you can see, every time I go to set the timer on my oven, I screw it up in one way or another. Now that your mixture has baked for the 30 minutes, it is ready to eat and you are to serve it immediately. This was so yummy and we enjoyed this so much that my husband went ahead and started trying to plan the next time we would make it, which he said we should do for around Christmas. However, I told him that the Southern Living Casseroles has a Christmas recipe, so we shall see if this makes the rotation for Christmas or not. Also, half of this fed 4 of us with leftovers, so I think next time we should split it up into 2 pans. That way we have 2 meals.